Hi. Today my guest on the show is Nigel Brunel, a carbon broker from OM Financial. Hi Nigel, can you tell me about the emissions trading scheme? Why do we have to have it?
New Zealand has signed the Kyoto Protocol, which is a legally binding international agreement to reduce our emissions to our 1990 levels between the years 2008 to 2012. The Emissions Trading Scheme, or ETS, is a mechanism by which it makes the polluters pay for their emissions and pay those who reduce emissions. A carbon tax is another mechanism. New Zealand has a hybrid ETS, which is a combination of both.
Who are these polluters and how do they pay?
I prefer to call them emitters. They are the major industrial emitters like the power companies and fuel companies. They have to file an annual return for their emissions similar to a tax return and give the government carbon credits or a tax equivalent for their carbon footprint. They have to buy one carbon credit for each ton of emissions and surrender it to the government. The government then cancels that credit.
Where do New Zealand carbon credits come from and where do the emitters buy carbon credits from?
Carbon credits come from a few sources. Forests are one. The vast majority of carbon credits in New Zealand come from sequestration in trees. Trees suck in carbon and turn it into wood fiber. You can also create carbon credits by building renewable energy projects. These mainly happen in China and India.
Okay, how do you get the credits out of the trees?
The forest owner applies to the government and they put the carbon credits into their carbon registry account.
And what are these credits worth?
Each credit equates to 1 ton of CO2 equivalent and gives the emitter the right to send 1 ton of CO2 into the atmosphere. Right now, these credits are trading at about $20 per ton.
Well, let me get this straight. I can go buy some land and plant trees and the government will give me money. How long do they do that for?
Basically every year for as long as the tree keeps sequestering carbon. To give you a rough example, if you planted 100 hectares of trees, you could claim up to 5,000 carbon credits every year for about 25 years.
Wow. That's $100,000 per year for 25 years.
Correct. Please bear in mind that's a rough and slightly optimistic example which requires certain factors remaining constant.
Okay, what is the catch?
Well, if the trees are harvested or burnt or blown down or die from biological disease, you have to pay back 75% of the carbon credits you have claimed. However, you don't have to harvest and you can insure against most of the other risks.
Okay, so there are risks, but they can be mitigated to some extent. Why do I only have to pay back 75% of the credits I have claimed if I harvest?
Because under the rules of the Emissions Trading Scheme, 25% of trees at harvest remain as stump and litter. The ETS assumes you will replant and that's how you repay the 25% through regrowth.
Okay, I get it. So no free lunch, but it sounds like quite a good deal. How much does it cost to buy 100 hectares and plant trees?
It could cost up to, say, $2,000 to buy some marginal cleared land and maybe $2,000 to buy seed, plant trees and other minor costs. That's per hectare, so about $400,000 in total.
That's a pretty good return. So let's summarize that. I invest $400,000 and I can earn up to $100,000 annually for 25 years.
That's basically correct, and you still own the land and the trees. But let's throw a few caveats in there. It assumes you can buy and plant for that cost. It also assumes that your trees can grow where you plant them. It also assumes that carbon will be $20 every year you sell. Carbon has been as low as $16 and as high as $21 a ton. The last and major caveat is that the ETS remains in place.
Okay, so through the ETS, emitters furnish annual emission returns and carbon credits or pay a tax equivalent to cover the carbon footprint. Emitters buy their carbon credits in New Zealand from forest owners. So the credits are issued by the government and then consumed by the government through the ETS process.
That's correct. So those that pollute or emit pay. The reality is it makes them uncompetitive against their competitors who emit or pollute less. We are injecting a price for carbon into the economy. By doing this, it incentivizes change to renewable non-polluting energy sources. That's the theory anyway.
Thanks, Nigel, for that insight, and that's the end of the show. Hopefully you are all still awake at the end of that.